Hi, we are the Good Ship Illustration, and we run online courses to help illustrators and image makers navigate a creative career. We are Tanya,
Katie
and Helen. We have about 70 years experience between us, each of us working in a different area of illustration.
Welcome to Message in a Bottle, our new podcast answering your questions. You can send your messages to goodshipillo@gmail.com and title it Message in a Bottle so we know what it's about. Welcome back to the Good Ship Illustration podcast. This week we're going to be talking about getting work. We've had lots of juicy questions on all things regarding getting work. So this is the first one. And this person has asked, could there be something on the podcast about how to get started, especially if you aren't a young thing just out of art school? Yes, that's the first question.
Well, my first thought is, are you showing everybody your work? Does everybody know about your work? Are you showing it to a big audience? Have you got a website? You need to show your stuff and get it out there in every possible way you can think of. Have you got an Instagram account? I mean, you don't have to have every social media going. If there's one that you like better than everything else, stick there. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's about controlling what you can control, isn't it? And the bit of this that you can control is being in the way of opportunities, like showing your work, putting your work out there, so that people trip over you and know what you do. Don't keep yourself a big secret, basically.
Tell us that quote from Leonie when you talked to Leonie Dawson. Tell us that thing she talked about, the cookies.
Yes. There was the brownies analogy, metaphor thing. So, it's been so long. It's like basically you're baking some brownies and your friends around, and there's like the smells wafting out the kitchen, and they're like, "Oh my goodness, this smells so good," and you keep slamming the kitchen door shut and saying, "Go away, don't look at my brownies." And they're like, "Okay, it's a bit weird, but never mind." And you keep baking them, and they're fully baked, and you're about to cut them up, and again people are coming in like, "Oh, those brownies, please. Like, you've made them, you're our friend, we want to see." And you say, "Get out of the kitchen!" And then you sit down in the corner of the kitchen and you eat all your brownies yourself and nobody knows about them. And you have them.
And then you wonder why nobody's eating your brownies.
And then you wonder why nobody's eating your brownies. And yeah, the brownies in this instance, it's your illustration. And like, you want to share that with the world. People want to see your work. Your work has value.
What do you think about, sometimes people worry about sharing their work because either they're shy and they feel self-conscious, or they're worried it'll be stolen.
Yeah, we were just talking about this for editorial, weren't we?
Yeah, well, because your work's on display if you're working for a magazine, or even if you're working for an online magazine, it's actually downloadable from, an online site. And a lot of editorial work now is not happening on paper and print; it's online. So you've got to get used to showing your work anyway. You have to overcome that shyness, because that will cripple you when you're working, thinking someone's going to print this in about a week's time and everyone's going to see it. So you have to work on that confidence side of things. But the whole point about being an illustrator is you are in the public domain and people are looking at your work. So wanting to hide it won't work, because people won't steal it anyway. It doesn't happen in those situations. And the whole point of being an illustrator is showing off your work and giving everyone a brownie to eat.
It's an advert, isn't it? Every time your image shows up somewhere, that's an advert for you and what you do.
Totally.
And if your work is very unique to you, like you know what your visual voice is, then the publishers are going to come to you. Why would they say, I absolutely love that stuff Tanya Willis does. Let's find somebody a bit like us.
To do a version of it.
Yeah, they're going to go to the source of this brilliant imagination that, we talk about this in the Freak Flag courses. If you find your own voice, it's so unique to you, they're not going to go to anybody else.
No, because they can't get the magic that you've created from somebody else. They can try, but it'll be a shite second-rate version.
Yeah.
We were looking at some really beautiful Italian illustration, weren't we, at lunchtime? Yeah. And we actually started squealing with excitement because some of these drawings were so brilliant, like a felt-tipped green horse by Andrea Antinori. If you haven't seen their work, it's really beautiful. And Noemi Vola.
Naomi Vola, V-O-L-A.
Oh, Noemi Vola.
Emmy Vola.
Oh, Noemi, I think.
We'll have to put these names. I think we'll have to put these names in the description at the end. I can't remember.
But the work was so good and so unique and so weird. No one would copy it, despite the fact that we all loved it to
It was
bits.
glorious to look at.
Yeah.
It made us so happy. We were shrieking.
Yeah.
Tanya was shouting, "Look at the blue squirrel!"
And so if you were an art director looking at that, you wouldn't mess around and go, that's exactly the blue squirrel I want in my next children's book commission. You wouldn't go look for someone who does something a bit like it, but a weaker version. You will have that person who's just radiating weirdness and cuteness and excitement, because it kind of it comes through the image. And if it makes you squeal, then it's really working. So you want to become that person. No one else is going to use. No one's going to use a kind of fake copy version of it.
And I also think it doesn't really matter if somebody does try your hat on for a bit.
Yeah.
It doesn't really matter. You just sail your own ship. And if you become aware on Instagram that somebody's done something similar to yours, the best thing to do is
Carry on.
just carry on.
Yeah.
Ignore it. Get on with your next piece of work. The only important thing is your next piece of work.
Keep
I
making
ignore
stuff.
all that. There's no point wasting any energy over it.
It can be frustrating, and I think, sometimes there's complete blatant plagiarism and someone gets a massive job copying another illustrator.
Yeah, that's different.
And then that's a kind of legal issue. But some people, like you say, might be trying your hat on for a while, and then they find out what they needed, which was a magic kind of colour approach or how to use line, and then they veer off at the next crossing into another direction, just taking a little bit of you with them maybe, but they become themselves. They don't.
But you don't have to worry about that, I don't think. Like you say, unless it's a big legal thing,
Yeah.
just sweep it aside.
But going back to being found, I think what's interesting is, you definitely have to show your work, but you do need to think, who are you showing your work to? So a great way to think of this is have a kind of eyes closed in the dark session, thinking about who is your dream client, or who are your dream client. Are they other design companies or magazines or books? Or are they charities or
Actually,
tourism
I
bodies?
did this in,
Did you?
in 2019. I made a hit list. But the weird thing is, I didn't contact anyone on the hit list. So it was just, I made a list. I was like, people I would love to work for. And I wrote it and I stuck it on the wall. And maybe I'm a witch or something. Like, a lot of those people did find my work and I have worked with them since.
No, and you didn't call them?
I didn't call them. No. Manifesting. Spiritual witchery. But I don't know. I think if you decide what you want to do and you make work and you share it and you're sharing it with the very subconscious thing of like, I'd love to work for Google, that'd be so exciting.
Yeah.
Something happened that even without you being like, excuse me, Google, here's my cover letter and portfolio. Like they just, I don't know. Something.
That's amazing.
It's that thing about not trying to please everybody, isn't it?
Yes.
You're going out in your
you
direction.
think of your ideal client and then you make work that you think, that you love, but you hope they will love.
Exactly.
Rather than doing a huge spectrum of work that in different styles, different techniques that would please everybody.
Yeah. And it wasn't like I went out and made work thinking this is for Google. Like I just did work that was happening naturally. But then probably part of my brain was like, what are they like? Something might appeal to some of these sorts of people. And
maybe you're kind of trimming your work subconsciously.
And even the words you put on your website, and you're kind of keeping an ear out for like what they're doing, and in the pandemic, what's happening for them. And
Would that be SEO when you say words on your website? And
Yeah,
is that
definitely.
where you're doing some of your kind of search engine optimization signaling to?
And it's like putting yourself in the client or the person looking for illustration, putting yourself in their shoes. What are they looking for? What are
If they do a Google search,
Yeah.
what are they putting in their Google search?
exactly? What are they Googling? What hashtags are they looking at on Instagram? Where are they hanging out? And then you just put yourself there.
What's really interesting is trying to find either a website developer or designer or a graphic designer online. If you've ever done that and you've been at the other side of your client relationship, it's really, really hard to find a web designer. You think, do I need one that lives near us, or could they be abroad? What skills do they need? Oh, they need a design sensibility so that they can build me a nice website. You realise how hard it is for someone to find illustrators with a certain visual sensibility or a thing that you can't really name.
Yeah.
So if you start trying to name who you are or what it is you do, you can do it like Katie says, put yourself in their way, or just happen to trip over in front of them.
Yeah.
So it's easier with map design because you're doing maps, so who needs maps? And I remember when I came back to the UK, I was like, I would like to design a map for someone who owns lots of estates in Scotland. I can be their dedicated mapper and I can just go and visit these beautiful estates. I'll draw their castles and Then the other one was I wanted to draw people's vineyards. So then you start thinking about, wine labels and vineyards that might actually want to do this. And you go and look at your potential clients and think, how can I make them find me? I mean, that's easier with maps because it's really, really niche. But there must be something about you that is niche that you can say, who would really benefit from what I do? And how can I connect? And LinkedIn is a boring, dried up old place sometimes, but it's actually a really good place to research these businesses, people who could be your clients, and start using hashtags in your postings that signal to people who would use you.
I was talking to picture book people, publishers, about where they look for illustrators now. And they do search online, but a lot of them were saying they use Instagram a lot. They're on Instagram, they enjoy it themselves, they post on Instagram, and they hang out in the illustration community seeing what's around. So it's really
so visual.
Really visual. It's so visual, isn't it, Instagram? And all illustrators love playing on Instagram. So it's nice to keep your Instagram feed looking lovely.
Yeah.
I think I said on the last podcast, actually, they were saying they like seeing behind the scenes stuff, but they don't want to see 100 pictures of your dog.
Yeah.
They want to get the balance right. So there's plenty of lovely illustration work, and then the odd bit of home in between.
Yeah. And there's no set ratio, is there? I think if you just look at your feed as if you are a publisher or an agent landing on your thing for the first time, and you're having to scroll way back to see illustration, or is it sprinkled throughout nicely? And that's like common sense, really.
Yeah.
What would you say, Katie, for scribing and live illustration? What kind of words do you use? How do you signal to your clients, or where do you put yourself? Besides manifesting.
I just thought of what words are they searching for, and I was like, draw my meeting. Like somebody who has no idea what, because graphic recording and scribing is kind of niche, weird words that nobody's heard of, unless they are a live illustrator. So I was like, draw pictures at my meeting, or conference artist, weird words that just that's what I would say. And I also would listen really carefully when I spoke to people. And they'd say things that made me cringe a little bit, doodle artist. I'm like, ugh, but okay, I'll put that in somewhere, it might help. It's just interesting because I think it's easy when you're in an industry to get buried in
jargon,
esoteric, and you've got to really try and remember what human beings say.
Exactly, that's human beings who don't use your industry, trying to look for website developers. With a nice taste, or or even they use all those weird words because you're the newbie.
Yeah, if you were drawing houses or something, a normal person with a house is googling artist to draw my house, or painting of my house. They're not googling. I can't think of it.
Architectural.
Architectural illustrations. It's still
So it's all those things. I think that's how you find the work that you want. Decide what your dream clients would be and dream jobs. And then think about it from the outside, how they'd find you.
Reverse engineer it.
Yeah, totally. What's the next one then?
How did you get your first break in illustration? First big break?
I'm too old to remember. It's a blur. I can remember some. Can you remember yours?
I can remember the first picture book. So I started, this is pre-internet days, so I took my folio to publishers. I remember Penguin had every Friday you could drop your folio off in the foyer and leave it, and then you had to go back at the end of the day and pick it up. Anyway, I had a meeting one day, and every publisher I'd been to see had been really lovely and saying, we love your work, and when we find an author, then we'll give you a ring. But they never came up with a story for me to illustrate, and that went on for a few months, and I thought, this is really annoying. How can it be that hard to find me a story? I'll write a story myself.
Very you.
That's pure Stevens.
It was pure fury of being impatient. So I can remember sitting at my table, which was also the dining table, and spent about a week writing a story, went back to publisher, said, I've got a story now. And they said, we love it. And they gave me a contract. So that was my first picture book deal. Yeah. Yeah.
All done by yourself.
All done by pure frustration and fury at them not being quick enough.
Yes.
Yeah. Rule breaking as well, because it goes back to that permission thing. You didn't really wait for permission for that.
No.
You are always fast as well, though. When you want to do something, it's
if I've got
happening.
Yeah, if I've got a goal, I just want to do it now.
Yeah.
Really, now. I'm just really impatient.
Well, it's obvious
Yeah.
that works. Take note, everyone. If you want to do it, do it yourself. Don't ask permission and get on with it quickly, and don't make
Yeah.
a big meal out of it.
Yeah. Yeah, that was it. Don't make a big meal out of it as well, because I thought, right, okay, picture books. They've got, what, 12 spreads? Well, that can't be too hard, can it? I can write 12 sentences. And I thought, what about kids? And I thought about my nieces and nephews and how meal times were always stressful and they didn't want to eat. I thought, I'll write about that. And that was it. That was my first book.
Bish bash bosh.
Bish, bash, bosh.
Right.
Exactly. And then I learned on the job. Obviously, I had no idea what I was doing, but I managed to get a job. And then I'd learn on the job. It's like a brilliant apprenticeship. It's been an apprenticeship ever since.
It's the best way, isn't it?
Yeah.
In at the deep end.
Yeah.
See what happens.
Yeah.
And that thing that we're talking about, ignore the rules, because some of the people that have told you the rules in the beginning might A, be wrong, or B, being polite because they don't know how to tell you they don't really want to use your
Well-
work. And so they tell you something polite to slightly put you off.
Yeah.
You were talking about this,
Yeah.
weren't you?
Oh, this made me think of something else as well. Is so after I had a few books published, I thought, maybe I should go and get some actual training about writing. Perhaps that would be an idea. So I went and did the Avon Foundation course, writing course, which is like a 3-day residential course, which was brilliant. But on that course, I found out how to get published. And I found out that you must not approach publishers. You must submit your work in specific ways with specific covering letters. I didn't do any of that. And I can remember sitting there thinking, well, why would anybody do that? Don't do that. I just think you can ignore a lot of the rumours about how to get in and just be really, really persistent and you take no for an answer, but you don't let it put you off. You just carry on.
Yeah.
And business is really different now anyway, isn't it? Those were the days, probably in the 80s and 90s, where there's only one route to this, as we were talking about earlier. Get a portfolio, put your work in it, print it at the cost of £250 and knock on doors. Well, no one does that anymore. Technology has obviously allowed us to move on. But in the same way that you don't have to have permission to call people. If you want to approach a pub, they've all gone. We can do what we want in our own way. And as long as it's creative and kind and memorable, then there's no reason why you shouldn't invent your own ways of doing things, because
I felt like there was no other way. I didn't know. Nobody told me what the right way was. So I didn't know who to ask either.
It's like that.
So I just did it.
Naivety is a superpower.
It is a superpower.
You just ploughed straight in. It
Yeah.
worked.
Oh, and it was, how did you get your first break in illustration? So Helen says, by ignoring all the rules, do what you want, be quick about it, and don't get all caught up in detail.
Yeah. Bish, bash, bosh.
Yes. Before you tell you, what was your big first break?
I think mine was probably, we all went to magazines. First out of college, it was like, okay, the nursery slopes are editorial, because that's the only illustration we really understood in our group. But you didn't go for the Sunday Times magazines because they were too high end. So we'd go things like Construction Monthly and Legal Weekly and all these kind of things. So they had really nice art directors working for those groups. They were usually young art directors who were friends of friends. So we'd always get work for medical, legal, and construction magazines. And they were quite a good way of working because not everyone saw it, and you didn't get that rabbit in the headlights thing on your first few jobs thinking, oh my God, everyone's going to see this, and I've panicked halfway through. So it was a good dress rehearsal place for working. But that was lugging the portfolios around and meeting lots of nice art directors. So that was mine. How about yours?
Yeah, I was thinking about this. I think the first one that kind of got the ball rolling for live illustration was Stella Artois, the beer company. And they must have found my website by Googling Newcastle Illustrator or something, because my old website I had a sketchbook page and I just put loads of drawings from my sketchbooks in, and it was random work, paintings and digital art. Anyway, they were like, we've seen your sketches of buildings and stuff. Do you think you could do those onto some beer glasses? And I was just like, yes, I could. Had no idea where to begin, no idea what to charge or anything, but it was in a pub in Newcastle drawing onto these beer glasses, and it was like a beer promotion thing. But I'd spoken to a good friend and she'd said, if you get any work like that, get a photographer, hire a photographer to take some good photos of you doing it.
Oh.
And then you can put it on your website afterwards. And I was like, that's really good advice. So I did. In the end, the photographer didn't even charge me because she was just like, "This is cool. I need some experience as well." Actually, I should get in touch with her. Anyway, and that really, because I then posted about that on my website, the next person to get in touch was Dove. And they were like, "Oh, you've done some work on glass. We would like you to do these massive windows in London at a beauty influencer event." So it really escalated quickly from pubs. It was pubs in Newcastle, and then they sent me down to Gloucester and Bristol and Cheltenham, which was exciting because I got to travel around. But yeah, then the Dove thing in London, and then Nespresso in London, and then that sort of, it just kind of kept going from there. And there's been Pret and other things, but that was the window painting, and that's kind of a sideline now compared to the graphic recording and live illustration. But it was just interesting, like a tiny little, just by, again, I had my work on the internet. It wasn't even like cohesive or like a beautifully curated portfolio. I was just like, I like drawing the rooftops in Berwick. Here's my sketchbook. It probably wasn't even a good scan. It was probably like an iPhone photo, like put on. And yeah.
That I remember that time. When you talk about it now, from the Stella Artois beer glasses to the amazing Dove film and everything, it wasn't long, was it?
No,
it was literally about 3 months. It went stratospheric.
And I was still working as a nanny at the time, so I used to have to be like, "I'm sorry, I can't come into work. I've got to go to London.
Children can look after themselves.
Yeah.
Here's some yogurts."
I did quit eventually, obviously, and I was a lecturer at the same time as well, so it was like balancing all these things at once, and it wasn't regular enough for me to feel safe to leave the lecturing. And also I had this whole thing of like, lecturing is a good job, don't leave that.
Even though it was exhausting and tiring.
But the pandemic was really handy for that. It was like, I think it made decisions much easier to make.
Yeah.
Like, nah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So the next one is finding work on your own versus having an agent. I've never had an agent, so
neither have I.
I've had both experiences with and without. So started out without, and that was fine, got work. And then thought, maybe I should get an agent, maybe I could get better deals. So I got an agent, and that was a nightmare. She kind of stirred up problems between me and the publisher. She was quite a gossip, and she was awful. So I was with her maybe 6 weeks, and I left her, and she actually wrote me a really long letter, in handwritten, 2 sides of A4, 2 pages, about why I would never work again.
Nice.
Yeah, that was lovely. And I was like early 20s. I don't know how old she
you
was.
must have been quite fragile, even though you are Helen Stevens. That would really
It was
knock
horrible. I was really upset. I really cried. I didn't believe what she was saying, but it was horrible to have an argument with somebody 30 years older than me.
Who
it was frightening.
Especially who you believe holds all the power to a successful future or not. Then that throws all. You're already doubtful as a young graduate.
Yeah.
That's brutal.
Oh, it was horrible. I kept that letter for years. I always wish I could find it. I can't find it now. It's in a file somewhere.
But we would have to say she was an absolute anomaly, wasn't she? Agents.
Oh yeah, I've never
like
come across anybody like that again. Anyway, then I went alone again with no agent, and that was absolutely fine. You don't need an agent to work in kids' book publishing. Publishers are happy to work with people who are agented or not. And then I remember came a point where I felt like I was just doing too much admin, too many calls about contracts, chasing up payment. So I got an agent for that. So I didn't really get an agent to find me work, because I actually enjoy the relationships with people, and I don't very often have to find work, because if you have a publisher, that relationship can last 10, 20 years. So I didn't really need somebody to find me work, but somebody who's on my side, helps with the planning, sorts out the deals. So yeah, I have an agent now, but I think in the world of picture books, it doesn't matter whether you do or not.
That's mind-blowing, because I would have always thought picture books needed agents to get you through the door to publishers.
I think that's a common feeling, isn't it? Because I thought that as well, that you get an agent and then you get a picture book.
No, I wouldn't say that's true. And in my experience of talking to lots of illustrators, when they do have an agent, that still doesn't get them a foot in the door.
Especially if they've got loads of people on their books.
It doesn't necessarily lead to getting a foot in the door. So I think if you're a person who's self-motivated and confident, I would still, if I was starting out now, represent myself.
Yeah. But you said before that you are your best promoter.
Who's going to market me more? Like, who is more determined to do it now and right now than me?
Yeah, exactly.
So Yeah, it depends what you want. You should be very clear about what you want your agent to do. So if you do get an agent and you've wanted them to get you work and you're with them for a couple of months and still no work is coming in, then I would reevaluate and find another agent. Because you could be putting all that effort into finding work.
I think the reason I would like an agent sometimes is to get those jobs that you can't get when you see people who have either done maybe nice surface pattern stuff that's been done in a range and it's gone on to homewares, or it's been used on toys or fabrics. Those are the tricky clients to get in front of, I think, unless they find you on Instagram. But also accessing premium clients that agents have got good relationships with. The other thing is that they can often get you a much higher rate because clients will lowball you as an individual, but they know they can't do that with an agent who is fully versed in the fees, the going fees for that kind of project at that kind of time. Agents are also good for contracts and ensuring that you get the right deal, you get intellectual property coverage, and they'll negotiate licenses for you and how long that contract will last. So they'll maximise your money. Well, a good one will maximise as much money you can get from one individual job. But the other side is an agent I really wanted to be with approached me and said, did I want to join them when we would do a trial? So the first jobs they got me were editorial, and they didn't even get a higher fee than I could have got with the magazine. So I was like, I'm giving you guys 30% of an already poor fee. Because at that point, I think a lot of people were thinking, it's just not doable to work for magazines anymore because the rate hasn't changed. So I haven't had an experience yet, but I haven't really committed to an agent. I do keep thinking about it. But then, of course, they don't want you to turn down jobs. If they're bringing a good job to you and you've been asked for it, it's in their interest for you to do that job. Now, it might be that you think, I just want 3 weeks, three quiet months, I'm exhausted, or I don't want to do that. And you can't really turn jobs down too often, I don't think, when they've been bought.
I do with my agent. I tell her, when it was the Bologna Book Fair last year, I just said to her, pretend I don't exist, don't put any work in there. I've got so much work. And they don't mind. They're there for the long term. I mean, maybe it's different with an illustration agent because I'm with a literary agent and they're there for the long term.
And I think with a book, you're going to commit to a year or 2 years to focus on that. Even with the run up to it, and then when you're actually doing the work, it's a long stretch of time. But if someone says, I've got a brochure for you, or I've got a range of fabric clothes, we've got a month and a half on this, let's get on with it. I don't know, that's in saying that I suddenly think, I'd love to do that. But then that's the freelancer's curse. You can't say no. You're constantly thinking of more and more ways to get work. And you can't turn anything down, can you?
It's hard. It's so hard to say no.
I was going to say there, after I said you don't necessarily need an agent, what I should say is that you should learn how to read a contract.
Yes, I was going to say that.
Yeah.
And if you don't know where to begin with contracts, the AOI, Association of Illustrators, they've got templates and stuff which are really good. Actually, that ties into was the next question about the. Oh no, it wasn't. It was a different. I was thinking about the nightmare clients thing because I had a nightmare client straight out of uni, but because I'd used a contract from the AOI, I was able to get the 25% fee, even though everything was cancelled, which was amazing.
Yeah, brilliant.
So things like that, a contract will save your butt.
Yeah, never work without a contract.
Yeah.
Always have a contract.
AOI resources are really, really good. And they can teach you, there's templates for terms and conditions. So whenever you send a quote or an estimate for a job, you always send your terms and conditions in. And that's the basic stuff. We spend so long worrying about, is our work good enough? We forget the business things that anyone else would normally do in any other profession.
Yeah.
So you haven't had an agent?
No. But weirdly, now I'm in the position where I get more work than I can do. So I have hand it over to other illustrators. But that's more like an agency thing than an agent. So is it the same thing? Agency, agent? Not really.
Well, you have people who you're passing work on to, so you are their agent. But do you represent them for everything they do, or just?
No, it's literally just.
So it's not quite. Yeah.
It's more like I just share.
And you're not promoting their work.
No.
Yeah. It's like a cooperative, really.
Yeah, it's more like a cooperative. Yeah. That's nice. I like that word. Steal that. Yeah, I haven't had an agent, and I've never. I think I wanted one when I thought it was the only way to be an illustrator. Yeah. I was like, what you do an illustration degree. You get an agent.
Yes.
Work is magically delivered to you. The rest of your life, happily ever after. And then when I graduated, I was like, oh no, I've been lied to. This is not how it is.
Because that also stops you from going after, when we were talking about putting yourself in front of the kind of clients you want to work for, that's a decisive action. An agent could be great, but they will often bring you things, then you could be swept off in a different direction because you become quite good at something, or you do a lot of those jobs and you were regarded as that person, whatever that person might be, I don't know, reportage illustration or...
I quite like that. I work like directly with the clients,
yeah,
their organisation.
I like that too. So I don't ever have my agent between me and the person I work with. I do speak to illustrators sometimes. It seems quite common in picture books where the agent, you'll have your picture book ideas, send it to your agent. They might edit it a bit or have some ideas how to change it before they send it out. I don't like that. I like to work direct with the editor. I don't really want my agent to give me opinion before I even get it out. I think it's really important you tell your agent what you want. When you go and see somebody, if you want an agent, you're really, really clear about what you need out of this and reevaluate it a few months in and see if this is happening. Because it's not like the power's not all in their hands. You are the illustrator and you need an agent to work for you. It's not the other way around.
And also it's much better to talk directly to clients anyway, because the kind of nuanced conversation about revisions and changes, which is already an awkward conversation for an art director to open something and think, oh my God, the colours are all wrong. How am I going to tell them this? If that then goes through a third party, i.e. your agent, and it comes to you, the tone has already changed. And that could get your back up. That could make you feel, you're working in a sort of defensive or disappointed mode. It's much easier to talk directly and have those kind of direct conversations with the person who's commissioning you, I think. So the other one, you might have done half of this now, Helen, but someone says, I've been an illustrator for over 10 years living in Cumbria. I just wondered if you could offer any advice to an illustrator trying to break through as an author. If you have a story and illustrations, what would your next step be in the competitive world of children's book publishing?
I think if you've got a website with lovely illustration on it, you've got your folio, you're doing exactly the kind of work you would do if you were purely an illustrator. But you also say on your website that you have story ideas, and then those publishers will ring you and they might say, can we see your story ideas? And they might want those, or they might use you as an illustrator. But publishers are really open to people being author illustrators. It's the ideal scenario, I think, because you're in control of the whole, well, obviously the publisher. You work as a team with your publisher. It's not as if you have the idea for the book, that's it, you're in control of the book. You really do work as a team. But the nice thing about writing it yourself is that you get to write about what you want to draw. So it's very it's a kind of, you write yourself a brief, it's lovely. I'd just say have a brilliant, as we've said with everybody else, have a brilliant folio on your website and say on it that you have story ideas as well.
Would you join a Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators as well?
That's a good idea. That's a good idea. Scooby.
Anything like that brings opportunities into your awareness.
Yeah, whenever you get those opportunities to network with other people who are either in publishing or want to get into publishing, those are brilliant. Any social events. Yeah. There's
always meetups and stuff as well. I know in London and Berlin there was illo. That was really good. Just for meeting, like I say, meeting other illustrators and not being on your own.
Yeah, because then you can share advice and tips and make contacts.
It's kind of counterintuitive though. I remember, although a lot of us graduated from the same year and worked in a studio together and supported each other, once we moved off and were on our own living in another town or country, that old kind of paranoia, competitive thing set in, and people would say, "Oh, go and network with other illustrators." Why? Because they're the competitors. Why would I want to network with people who are chasing the same jobs as me? Which, of course, they're not chasing the same jobs as you. You just need to kind of get rational about it. But networking with your own people is the best thing you can do. And you go onto Facebook groups like the Scooby group, a Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators. I used to, even though I only did a little bit of children's book illustration in Hong Kong, their Facebook threads were just such a huge support. And watching people sharing resources with each other, warning off vanity publishing and the kind of exploiters, but also offering news of when agents were looking at manuscripts. It was such a sharing and kind of open community. Definitely go to your people.
It's how you find out which publishers pay properly and which don't, and which publishing houses mess you about and which don't. There's also Picture Hooks, who are based in Scotland. They're brilliant as well. They have lots of competitions and they have a mentoring scheme. They I think it's every second year they have 5 illustrators. They choose 5 illustrators who will be mentored by 5 established. Might have gone up to 7.
Might have done,
Yeah, 5 or 7 illustrators, and they pair them up, and you have a 9 months mentoring with a professional illustrator. That's amazing.
Yes. And they do competitions all the time too, don't they?
Yeah. It's a really good way of being seen because it's a good community.
There's also our course, the picture book course.
Mm.
And then inside that, there's the 8-week course, and then there's also a Facebook community. And it's the same thing. People share what they're up to, what they're doing.
And in the picture book course, I talk a lot about writing and illustrating together. So if you're an illustrator who would like to make the whole picture book, the words and the pictures, we do a lot of that. We've got a lot of advice about how to do that.
You've got interviews with children's book agents, and they talk about how they approach people and how they find other people. We've also got a typographic lecture, which it's type and children's books. There's so many good resources in it. But also, going back to very big, widespread stuff, even having a portfolio on Behance is a good place as well.
I don't know what that is.
Behance, I think, was bought by Adobe. And now if you have any Adobe subscription, you get access to Behance.com. And a lot of global art directors use that. And when I was looking at things for the children's book course for colour, I found a lot of really nice illustrators on there. Overseas illustrators, so Chilean and Nordic illustrators. So you can see Behance might work in other global markets. Like we have British ways of doing things, don't we? We're used to our system, but that's another good place. And it's not just for children's book illustrators, it's for all illustrators. Mm-hmm. And most people are using some kind of Adobe product, so that you probably have a free Behance account, and if you don't, you've got free access to it, and you probably haven't used it, because I haven't.
I haven't.
It's enough getting a website together. So I think
we've covered getting work.
Yeah.
Be determined.
Yes, be determined. Ignore the rules.
Be resourceful. Imagine yourself as the client as well. How do they find you? Who's your dream client?
Don't be frightened of sharing your brownies.
Yeah. Share. Make work, share work.
So see you for the next message in a bottle.
Send your message in a bottle in. And if you'd like to learn more about the Good Ship, you can go to www.thegoodshipillustration.com. And we also hang out on Instagram. We're at The Good Ship Illustration. And we'll see you later.
Brilliant.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.